Even though power levels were disbanded in the Saiyan arc and the earlier portions of the Namek arc, they made a brief return when Frieza and King Cole came to Earth. After this, power levels were only used in movies and TV specials to re-establish the lore that was once set during the arrival of Raditz, because as the main series has shown us numerous times, power levels mean little when characters can raise and suppress their energy at any given moment. After this, we entered a period of fake power levels that were created to explain how strong characters were afterwards. To give fans credit, many of these fake power levels seem fairly accurate up until a certain point, but after the Saiyans exited the Room of Spirit in Time and gained an insane, incalculable power-up combined with their ascended Super Saiyan forms, the guessing game was over as the characters were too far removed from the Namek arc to even have an accurate guess. But in today's video, we will discuss Future Gohan and give a mountain of evidence to explain why he is by far the hardest character to power scale in Dragon Ball Z. Now we will begin with the manga and use what fans refer to as his Yardrat Goku statement, where Future Gohan makes a statement, and of course whatever manga version you're reading, the text can be different, but he basically says that he wishes that he was as strong as Goku before he passed away. Now fans use this statement to say that he's referring to what Goku was when he came back from Yardrat, but this is actually inaccurate, because what you have to understand is that Goku was alive for 3 more years after he came back from planet Yardrat and defeated King Cole and Frieza. And even though Goku wouldn't have trained as hard because he wouldn't have known about the android threat, we would still assume, just based off of who Goku is and the fact that Goku always trains, that he would have still trained for 3 years even if he wouldn't have gained as much as the main Goku did. And even the main Goku didn't gain quite as much as a character like Vegeta did. When we look at the statement that Piccolo made in saying Vegeta was stronger than Goku, what we're saying is that we have absolutely no clue how strong Goku was before he died, and this gives a cushion of how strong Future Gohan could theoretically be, because he can still be stronger than Yardrat Goku, but he can still be weaker than what Goku was before he died of the heart virus, and as a result of that, it makes it extremely difficult to calculate how strong Future Gohan actually is. Now what you have to understand about the manga is that there is only one side chapter that depicts Future Gohan, and this is chapter 397.5, which is also referred to as Trunks the Lone Warrior, which was a side chapter that Toriyama created to explain everything, and why Future Trunks had to go back to the past. But what you have to understand most importantly about this manga chapter is that there were 3 battles that took place that were off-screen, or shall I say off-panel, because there was an implied battle that was referenced where Future Gohan lost his arm, but we didn't see how he performed in this battle, and clearly he almost died and lost his arm, so he wasn't very good. And then when we compare this to the battle where Future Gohan died against Android 17, the battle with Gohan and 17 was off-screen, but considering the fact that 18 didn't have to jump in and she was laughing about Gohan having to fight 17, combined with the fact that Android 17 made a statement saying that he used less than half of his power, other sources say he used half of his power the last time he fought Gohan, and considering the fact that 17 held back so much, this means that Gohan never stood a chance and 18 never needed the help, because Toriyama was trying to show the audience how terrifying the androids were in a very short chapter, so Future Gohan was depicted as weak in the manga. Now we have to also understand that the 3rd battle that took place, which was not also shown on panel, is the battle that Future Trunks had against the androids, but we don't even know if Future Trunks fought one of the androids or both, but considering that Trunks made a statement that he could hold his own somewhat against the androids in the future timeline, which implied that the future androids were weaker, which evidence heavily suggests that Trunks miscalculated the androids, which is a totally different subject for a totally different day. All of this would suggest that Future Trunks probably fought both androids, even in the manga. And Trunks felt that after 3 years from Gohan's passing that he could have fought against the androids. And Bulma was warning him, even though she couldn't power scale, that Gohan got killed by them and that Trunks wasn't that different from him, but Trunks still felt that he should go out and fight. Now there will be some of you who will take Bulma's statement with a grain of salt and saying that, well, Bulma can't power scale, so why would she matter? But you have to understand that from a narrative point of view, this is an example of author interjection, where the author specifically makes a statement trying to imply to you what he's trying to make you think through another character, even if that character specifically can't power scale. So within the narrative of Dragon Ball, we should take Bulma's statement very seriously, because Toriyama had her say this for a reason, because he clearly used Bulma's statement to communicate to us, the audience, that Trunks was going to lose. Now what you have to understand about this is that this is also another battle that wasn't shown, and because of all of this, we have absolutely no clue about how Gohan or Future Trunks could even compare compare to each other in the manga because everything is off screen, and the manga chapter was just briefly explaining how these characters stood no chance. Now before we jump into the anime, there's one more major thing that we have to mention about the manga, and this is the mere fact that future Trunks was capable of turning into a Super Saiyan before Gohan died. If Trunks as a Super Saiyan is fighting against Gohan in his base form with one arm, this implies that the gap between them in strength was far greater in the manga, which means that Trunks must have gotten a titanic boost in power to even rival what Future Gohan's power was 3 years later if you consider the fact that he was only fighting against Gohan in his base form. Even though Gohan was confident that Trunks could surpass him one day by saying, "One day you're gonna leave me in the dust," different translations can phrase this in different ways, and that Gohan's statement could just be seen as him trying to give a kid confidence. Which also tells us something really quickly about the anime, that if future Trunks didn't even know how to turn into a Super Saiyan, and for him to even remotely approximate Gohan's power when he fought against the androids is extremely impressive considering the fact that he had far less time to even use the Super Saiyan transformation. So this is the manga aspect of why it's so hard to power scale Future Gohan. Now everything takes a major turn when we look at the anime adaptation, and it makes a lot of sense why. Because in order to add competitive balance and more drama to the situation, certain changes were made. The most obvious one is the fact that Trunks turned into a Super Saiyan after Gohan died, and crying over Gohan's body with no rain doesn't have the same effect as crying over his body with rain. Also, for competitive balance, the anime made Gohan and Trunks fight against the androids far better than what was implied in the manga, which would make sense because if the fights were completely one-sided the entire time, it wouldn't have been as entertaining to watch. The first battle that the TV special brought to life would be when Future Gohan fought the androids in the amusement park. The battle starts off with Gohan and 17 just fighting each other one-on-one, and 18 is in the background amusing herself as Gohan's fighting against 17. Now what is all of this really telling us? The fact that 18 doesn't even feel like she needed to jump in initially suggested that in the past when Gohan encountered the androids, specifically Android 17, that Gohan was such a bug and performed so badly that she could just have fun in the background because they know Gohan stands absolutely no chance. But you see, the anime makes a major change here because 18 jumps into the fight when Gohan was actually gaining an upper hand against Android 17, and once the two androids were ganging up on him, Gohan was getting wrecked, and of course Trunks tries to jump in. This doesn't work out very well, and Gohan eventually loses his arm. Now this is the first major change. The manga implies that in this earlier battle where Gohan lost his arm, it was just Gohan and 17, and that 17 wasn't even trying. So the fact that Gohan was fighting him in the anime and was actually looking like he was slightly winning the fight and 18 jumped in means that the anime version of Future Gohan is far more powerful, and that Gohan had improved greatly on his own from the last time that he fought against the androids. And when you also look at the fact that 17 was visually frustrated during the fight, also showed that Gohan did in fact pose somewhat of a threat to him during this battle. Now what you guys have to understand is that after Gohan lost this battle and gave Trunks the last senzu bean, and then Trunks wakes up off screen to save Gohan's life, there is a time skip that apparently took place. Now what you guys have to understand is that the TV special doesn't give us a direct sense of time, whereas the manga actually shows that there was approximately a year that passed from Gohan's last battle against Android 17, whereas the TV special made it seem like it could have just been a few weeks before Gohan fully recovered. What you also have to understand from this battle is the fact that Gohan should have gotten a theoretical Zenkai boost after this, but the thing that we have to understand is that Zenkai boosts were never really mentioned. It's a theoretical writing device, so theoretically he should have gotten a Zenkai boost, and the last major time that a character got a mentioned Zenkai boost in the main Dragon Ball Z story was when Cell self-destructed and came back as Super Perfect Cell from the brink of death. Because if you count every single time that a character should have gotten a theoretical Zenkai boost, then Dragon Ball history is completely rewritten. So in the anime we have Future Gohan getting a theoretical Zenkai boost with only a small amount of time before he recovered and went to go fight the androids again, whereas in the manga he had an entire year of training with Trunks, also combined with the fact that he should have gotten a theoretical Zenkai boost because he said he barely escaped, further emphasizing how much weaker Future Gohan was in the manga with that much extra time and a Zenkai boost, and he still didn't even stand a chance against 17 by himself. Now when you compare this to the anime, the androids make a statement when you look at the Japanese dub that they're going going to fully power up and kill Gohan this time by not allowing him to escape. Throughout the battle, it definitely did seem like the androids were trying, but some can argue whether or not the androids were still fully going all out, because there's certain points of the battle where the androids were smiling as they were fighting against Gohan, and when the androids got far more serious in the battle, Gohan was in serious trouble and actually tried to run away. Now understand that in both the anime and the manga, Future Gohan makes it pretty clear that he knew with absolute certainty that he was going to die against the androids, but he went to go do it anyways. And as a quick side note, the way that Gohan knocked Trunks out was slightly different, because in the manga, Gohan plays that classic trick where you tell somebody, "Hey, look!" and then he uses that to knock Trunks out, whereas in the anime, he basically agrees to fight with Trunks only to knock out Trunks when he was off guard. But one key moment that really illustrated how much more powerful Future Gohan was when he had a supposedly one-arm Kamehameha beam clash against the androids. Now, he didn't say Kamehameha, but the Dragon Ball fanbase combined with video games implies that this was supposed to be a Kamehameha, but it just wasn't called it. Very similar to the fact that characters would often just power up energy blasts that we clearly knew what they were without directly saying the name. But the point is that Gohan overpowered both androids at once in this beam clash. But unfortunately, because Gohan doesn't have infinite energy, as the battle dragged on, he started losing more, so fatigue makes a major difference in a competitive fight. Now, this might seem like a stretch, but you can argue that this would put Future Gohan somewhere in the realm of where Piccolo was when he fused with Kami, because Imperfect Cell felt that he wasn't strong enough to fight the androids until he had absorbed a lot more humans. And remember that this is an Imperfect Cell that came from the original Future timeline. The Imperfect Cell from the future already absorbed what few humans still remained in the future timeline, and still felt that he needed to absorb a whole bunch more in the present timeline to even have a chance of absorbing the androids, meaning that Imperfect Cell was individually weaker than the androids and absolutely weaker when they fight as a duo. And the fact that Piccolo fought head to head with a present version of Android 17, and we've already said before that you can say the present androids are stronger than the future ones, but as I said before, we will have a conversation in the future about how Trunks truly miscalculated how strong the future androids were, because we also have a mountain of evidence against that. So the fact that Piccolo fused can fight head to head with Android 17, and Future Gohan can at least hold his own against two future androids, even if you say the future androids were weaker, would clearly imply that he's at least above Imperfect Cell when we analyze how insanely strong he was depicted in the anime adaptation. All of this illustrates how insanely imbalanced his power scaling is, because this would make Future Gohan stronger than what Future Trunks was when he came back to help against the androids 3 years later. It would have put him above what Goku was, and it would have also put him above Vegeta, just based off of how he was performing visually. Now, the thing that we have to also factor in here, guys, is that Future Gohan also did this with one arm. He was still fighting at a handicap. So the anime version of Future Gohan, if he had both arms, could have performed even better than what we saw, even if he still eventually would have been overpowered and lost. He would have put up a better fight, because there's a natural handicap to fighting with one arm, ultimately showing that comparing him to a fused Piccolo is actually generous, because if he had two arms, he could have performed even better, and unfortunately he's not a Namekian, so he can't grow his arm back. And last but not least, when we analyze the final battle between Trunks and the androids, Gohan performed far better against the androids than Trunks did, even though Gohan eventually died. Now, I made a video in the past talking about the amusement theory, where the androids kept Trunks alive all these years, very similar to Gohan, until they got bored of him. But even if you don't accept that theory, Trunks visually performed far worse than Gohan did. There's even a direct scene where he's punching the androids directly in the face as a Super Saiyan, and they're looking at him and smiling. And when you also combine the fact that the androids were far more playful with Trunks, but against Gohan they were really trying to actually kill him, this shows that Gohan was holding his own against two androids that were putting in more effort against him, which shows that the gap between the anime version of Future Gohan and even Future Trunks is gigantic. Now, what you also have to understand is that, theoretically, once again, after Trunks had lost in that battle against the androids, he should have gotten a theoretical Zenkai boost, which would have meant that he would have approximated Gohan's power level by the time that he fought against Frieza and King Cole, which ultimately meant that the Trunks that killed Frieza and King Cole was far stronger than the Trunks that had fought against the androids, theoretically. Now, of course, this makes absolutely no sense, because it would be foolish to compare a future Trunks that killed Frieza and King Cole to a Piccolo that fused with Kami and fought off Imperfect Cell and a perceivably stronger present Android 17. This just illustrates how imbalanced Future Gohan's power scaling actually is, And it also gives us a glimpse as to what the Dragon Ball universe would look like if every single theoretical Zenkai boost was accurately taken into account. Because you have to remember that at the point of killing Frieza and King Cool, neither the original Future Trunks that died against Imperfect Cell and the main Future Trunks that we know had gone into the Room of Spirit in Time, so they both would have been equal up until the point where Future Trunks came back and went into the Room of Spirit in Time, which would have granted him far greater power than the original Future Trunks that got killed by Cell. We also have a filler flashback that I feel is worth mentioning called Ghosts from Tomorrow. There are certain changes, like Trunks has a sword when he's fighting against the androids, and he's also with Gohan in that final battle, as opposed to Gohan knocking out Trunks and going by himself. But even when we briefly look at the battle itself, this filler flashback seems to fall a lot more in line with the manga depiction than the anime depiction. Gohan was getting wrecked by Android 18 alone. Now you guys have to remember that Android 17 is stated in the manga directly to be stronger than Android 18. But based off of the eye test, despite the fact that 17 was stronger, the gap between him and 18 didn't seem to be that drastic, based off of performances from multiple characters. So I've always thought of them as being comparable to Goten and Trunks, where 17 is stronger, like Trunks was stronger than Goten, but they can clearly hold their own against each other. And of course, Dragon Ball Super completely changed all of this, where Android 17 is fighting on a Super Saiyan Blue level and all of the characters' power scaling is completely out of whack. But in the filler flashback, Future Gohan could never get any direct blows against any of the androids and only got in 2 sneak attacks, as you can see on your screen right here. And if sneak attacks are the best that you can do, it clearly shows that the filler was following the manga, which is ironic because the filler usually tries to extend the anime, but in fact, based off of its depiction, it was far closer to the manga. Now, we also have to mention that in this filler flashback too, we also see that 17 also easily defeats a future Vegeta, who would also be another character that would be hard to power skill him in reference to Future Gohan, but based off of all of the time that passed, it's universally accepted that Future Gohan was still stronger than Future Vegeta, especially if you're using the anime TV special The History of Trunks as opposed to this filler flashback. Because based off of how we would scale all 3 Future Gohans, we would say The History of Trunks would be the strongest, the manga would be the weakest, and the filler flashback would be somewhat in the middle. Because in the manga, the only hit that Gohan got on the androids was a sneak attack when 17 was blowing up buildings, is the full extent of how the manga was similar to the anime, because the anime was far different from almost every point on. Because the anime added sequences and was far different in its depiction of power scaling than what we saw in the manga. But at least we know that Gohan could at least do at least a little bit of damage. So yeah guys, for this mountain of evidence, this is why Future Gohan is the hardest character to power scale in Dragon Ball Z. And if you disagree, share your comment with me. But make sure to stay cool and stay safe, my friends.